Welcome back. You're listening to the discussion Innovation in Government, sponsored by Carasoft on Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guest today is Dave York, the Senior Vice President of the U.S. Public Sector for Genesis. Dave, before break, we were talking about kind of defining what AI is in the realm of customer experience, how it works, and the different pieces and parts that can kind of fit underneath this umbrella of AI. One of the things I want to touch upon to start this segment on is around the benefits, and you covered them a little bit. Obviously, one of the big ones is getting people off of the low-value work, getting them more high-value work. But let's talk more broadly about some of those other benefits that you guys are starting to see that agencies are experiencing as they apply AI to customer experience.
Well, I think the biggest single benefit is getting rid of the low value. I don't call it low value work, but the repetitive work,
the mundane
work, the stuff that makes everybody's head explode. And so you help them move away from doing that and let the machines do that, because that's really an optimal case for them. The second, though, is it reduces customer effort. Why is that important? The customers don't no longer view going to the DMV or calling the IRS or dealing with the Social Security Administration or dealing with CMS as a painful experience. They view it as a positive experience because it's rather rapid. They're able to get their issues resolved quickly and they move on. That reduction of customer effort cannot be underestimated in improving customer experience overall for the government. The third is that by implementing AI, and this is an interesting one, it came out of actually a recent McKinsey study about automation in the future workforce. And they said that it boosts the policymakers' awareness about the implications of leveraging AI, because not just for the government, but also them as they are making policy for regulating different industries, et cetera, in terms of encouraging them to do different things and ensuring that they don't implement AI in ways or leverage AI capabilities in ways that are harmful to the citizens.
That's interesting that they came up with Policymaker Awareness. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I think happens quite often in the federal market, at least, and you may see this from when you talk to customers, is they definitely have that shiny object syndrome. And I think it's probably not just the government, it's not fair to say them, it's probably everybody. And what I've seen over the last year and a half is definitely not every agency rushing toward AI or RPA, but really using it in a way that takes the half a step. Let's try it out, let's test it, let's learn and test more. Do you see that policymaker awareness is kind of sinking in the federal market?
Probably not yet.
Not yet.
Because it's still very, in many respects, pretty early stage in terms of the application, in the customer experience realm, I would say. And that's really the domain I can talk about. I would say probably not yet, because they haven't necessarily fully embraced or fully understand the implications of what it means, not just to the agents, because there's that human component we talked about before the break, but there's also the impact on the citizens who are interacting with that chatbot or whatever.
The other piece you mentioned was reducing the customer effort, and I think that's huge. I think that's where the government has been trying to go for much of the last 15 years. You know, if you remember from Mark Foreman's days when he was at OMB, he talked about 3 clicks to service, right? Don't make the person click more than 3 times, because then they get frustrated. Now I think it's even less. It's the 1 click to service, but through these tools, the agencies, the people who the customer experience people can serve in a different way. Are you seeing that reduction in customer effort already? Do you see it in certain agencies?
I actually have not seen a great deal yet, because there's not a huge uptake yet in the customer experience domain with some chatbots. Now there are some pockets.
And like USCIS.
I was just going to say USCIS has taken a pretty big step. And they've made a lot of efforts to integrate it, because that's a challenge that you can sometimes face in that regard. The challenge is you've created this chatbot, but it's a standalone channel. Now back to the whole omni-channel discussion and digital transformation. It's now a standalone channel all on its own. They've done, I think, quite a good job in trying to integrate that, or integrating that as much as they can across their different channels.
Yep. We talked about the kind of benefits. What about the challenges? What should agencies, what obstacles are they facing to implement kind of the AI and intelligent automation?
So I'll come at it from 2 different perspectives. I mean, certainly we have our viewpoint from talking with customers and what we see customers faced with, but this really bears out as well. Gartner did a study in 2018, a survey, and they came up with really the top 3. First one being skill gap. The second one being the lack of strategy for artificial intelligence or AI capabilities. And then the third is use cases. So you talked about agencies saying, I'll take a half step and then I'll test something out and then take another half step. Until they really understand the use case, it's hard to, you can have a strategy saying, I'd like to automate more, I'd like to leverage artificial intelligence or machine learning to automate more, but until you know what the use cases are, it's difficult to really put that into practice.
It seems so obvious, though, that the use case would be to improve customer experience.
Right.
I mean, every agency has a set of customers. Yes, they have to define who they are, and maybe they even have to get a slice of a slice of a slice to really say, we're going to focus on this type of customer. But it seems quite straightforward. Are you finding that when you meet with federal customers that they're trying to either do too much, bite off the big apple too much, or they just don't know where to start?
They'll say, let me just use, they actually don't do the slice of a slice of a slice and slice off the customer, and it's really not the customer that you want to slice off when you're trying to address AI in the
well, the customer services, right?
Right.
Like how you serve them.
Right.
So if the IRS has everyone as a customer, the IRS might say, I only want to work with people who fill out the 1040 EZ form.
Right.
Making that up, obviously, but they're not even doing that.
Well, no, they're looking at which it's really more what tasks, and so that leads to how do you plan for this? How do you plan for it there's really 3 steps. First, you need to know your customers, and so it goes back to knowing who they are, what their needs and expectations are, and more importantly, what repeatable functions are they doing that can benefit from the application of automation, either intelligent automation or some level of artificial intelligence, a chatbot or something interacting with them. The second is then, and this is a buzzword in the CX or the customer experience business, is journey mapping. Everybody talks about journey mapping the journey of a citizen or a customer through their life cycle with you. And the problem is, you can do that, but you then need to look at it and say, where can I insert, in this case, because the most obvious instantiation, again, is a bot, some form of a bot. Where can I insert a chat bot or a voice bot to interact with this citizen or this customer on their journey? And where does it make sense? Where does it simply aggravate them and elongate the process and frustrate them? And then the last piece is leveraging the right technology. So I talked about this a little bit earlier in one aspect, but there's a couple aspects to it. First of all, you have a chat. We'll just use the chatbot example. You have a chatbot, and it's talking with you. You're talking with it, but you then need to get to an agent. Well, you need that to be a seamless transition to that agent. But the second piece, and this ties back to the notion of omni-channel, you don't want this to be an automation capability that exists on your chat channel, but then your voice channel has a different automation capability that doesn't, that creates a very different experience, because the more different experiences you create for your customers, the more chance they have to get frustrated, take longer, and cost more to serve. So it really flies in the face of reducing customer effort then. So those are the big 3, I would say. Know your customer, map the journeys and find the places where you can automate, and then third, make sure the technology can be seamlessly integrated across channels.
Are agencies, as they kind of look at this, where do they have the biggest challenge of those 3 planning stages? Is it understanding the journey of their customer, or even just coming up with a strategy? Because I think the technology is probably the easiest of the 3.
It probably is the easiest of the 3, except that a lot of people will look at it and say, I just want a chatbot. and that's the challenge that I see. That's shiny object syndrome. I want a chatbot because I think that's somehow going to solve my problems. It's going to reduce my hold times, or it's going to make it more efficient. I'm going to free up people, whatever. It doesn't really, that in isolation won't solve the problem. So really, it's back to the journey mapping is probably the hardest part to do. And then close behind that is understanding your customers' expectations. If you have a demographic of customers that primarily only want to press 0 and talk to a live person, introducing a chat bot or a voice bot into that equation is probably not going to work very well.
Meaning if they had a whole customer base that was me. That's what that's
could be.
Probably.
Could be.
The reason we're talking about this topic of customer experience is there's a couple things that have happened in the federal sector that are really pushing agencies in that direction. First, obviously, there's the IDEA Act, which is about the this is ensuring that your websites are customer focused or reactive. And then also OMB updated Circular A11. I know before people's eyes glaze over, there's a specific segment of Circular A11 that really focuses on customer experience,
Right.
and giving agencies really that, hey, as you are planning out, as you are doing the planning, you really need to do these things. Let's walk me through a little bit about the background there, just briefly, and then we can get into why it's important for this broader conversation.
So it's interesting, you're right. A11 in particular does spell out a plethora of capabilities and needs and activities that agencies need to take into account. They need to do self-assessments, they need to report, they need to survey their customers. And what was interesting is, how does AI impact all that? Because there's nothing in it that says, go and implement AI or go and implement chatbots. You just need to improve your customer experience or the citizen experience. But in the reporting segment in particular, there's 7 total attributes, but 4 of those attributes that you report on from a customer experience perspective are all completely directly impacted by how AI or how automation is implemented in your agency's customer journey. One would be the effectiveness and quality. If you implement it well, you can dramatically improve the effectiveness of your customer interactions, your citizen interactions. Additionally, the ease and simplicity, that's back to the customer effort. It's easier for them to interact with you, then again, your score is going to go up there. Third is the efficiency and speed. The less you have to have people involved in the tasks, in the routine and the repetitive tasks, the more rapidly they get resolved, the faster people are getting served. And then finally, employee helpfulness, and I talked about that earlier, the notion of making them smarter. Not just it's one thing to be empathetic and friendly, and there are a lot of empathetic and friendly contact center agents out there. But if you can't answer the question, it doesn't matter how empathetic and friendly you are.
Right.
They'll like you, they'll just be frustrated. And so the point here is that this can be applied to really dramatically improve employee helpfulness as well.
Dave, we're just about out of time, in 30 seconds or less, what's the big takeaway from our conversation today? If agencies, no one's again started at zero, they're all down the path, what's the one thing that's most important from our conversation today that they should take away? The strategy and planning. If you don't plan your strategy, I would say, actually that's number one. There's a second one I'll come back to. You only got 30 seconds,
I know.
so quickly.
The strategy and planning is critical, and doing that with the customer in view. And then the second is, don't forget your employees. Bring them along for the journey and help them see the value, because the more effective they are, the better they feel about their work, the happier they're going to be, and the better the service they're going to provide your customers.
All right. Very true all around. But then unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. So let me thank my guest, Dave York, Senior Vice President of U.S. Public Sector for Genesis. Dave, thanks so much for taking the time today.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
I'm Jason Miller, and you've been listening to Innovation in Government on Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search innovation.